Get cool stuff for what you were going to do anyway. Drink beer. With Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt, you can just snap a photo of your receipt and upload it to the website to rack up points for exclusive merch. Get points for every purchase, whether you're grabbing a pint on draft, a case for a party, or a tall boy at the stadium. Any size, any product, anywhere you buy Labatt. Buy beer, get gear. Sign up now at rewards.labattusa.com.
Entertainment. People pay to watch this.
Pass to a cutting Hiltz. He darts in.
Oh! People actually subscribe.
All across central New York.
Time expired! Syracuse has done it!
It's Drive Time with your host, Tim Leonard.
Hey, guess what? I'm getting one. Hey!
We welcome you into Drive Time. Show number 3 of the new venture. Opening week of Drive Time. Happy Wednesday to everyone out there. New show, 5 to 6 on our airwaves. Local Syracuse sports talk. 1 hour every afternoon, every weekday afternoon. Phone lines are open throughout the show today. We'd love to hear from you. Your thoughts on SU football after game 1 against Tennessee. Your thoughts on the UConn game. Home opener coming up inside the Dome for a noon kickoff on Saturday. We'll continue to look towards that first game of the home schedule and the second game of the season. 315-437-7644. That is the phone number to call for ESPN 44. Phone lines are open throughout the show today. And we'll be with you for a jam-packed hour talking SU football, talking ACC football a little bit. Want to take stock of what we made of week 1 across the ACC. Pretty positive week 1 for ACC football. Not often that we get to say pretty positive week for ACC football in recent memory, but they did have 2 top 10 wins. We'll do a little stock up, stock down on the ACC in a little bit. But I want to start the show today by kind of going off something that I read this morning, which really crystallized for me what the single best trade is for Fran Brown and why he is pretty much a perfect coach for this era of college athletics. And I want to dive into that in detail. The thing that I read this morning, I should say, was about Dan Hurley, and kind of a wild story that came out, and I saw it was an excerpt from a new book that he is dropping in the coming days, and I don't know if this is just kind of Dan Hurley trying to sell his book a little bit, or if it's just truly Dan Hurley thinking this, but in case you missed it this morning, there was a lot to make of on college basketball Twitter and college basketball writers talking about how Dan Hurley was apparently on the precipice of resigning or taking a gap year or quitting from UConn basketball this year because he was very burnt out and because he felt like he gave it his all this season and there's so much that goes into coaching, and he's 52 years old, and after they did not win a third straight national championship, he was so upset and he was so distraught and so burnt out that he was going to resign from UConn basketball. The quote from Dan Hurley that's going around this morning: I knew in my mind, I knew my body, and I could feel that I was completely cooked. Just burnt. I don't even know how I was standing. Sounds very dramatic. So why did this get me thinking about Fran Brown? Well, I know we've seen a lot of comments in the last 3-5 years. Ever since NIL kind of became a thing, we've seen a lot of comments about how a lot of coaches are sick of the NIL. They're sick of the state of college athletics. They're complaining a lot about different things that are going on in college athletics. And I just feel like you hear a lot of complaining from coaches right now. Mike Gundy, the current head coach of Oklahoma State, might not be the head coach much longer. He's on the hot seat this year after a tough year last year. They're off to kind of a shaky start this year, already dealing with some injuries. They play Oregon this week. the news from Mike Gundy earlier in the week was on his weekly radio show, he started complaining about how much Oregon puts into their roster and how much they invest, and they invest about $40 million, and we've invested about $7 million in the last 3 years combined, and started talking about how can we compete with that. And I've talked to other coaches in the industry, and they feel like right now we should just schedule out-of-conference games against teams that have similar budgets, which started kind of a little bit of a retort from Dan Lanning, the Oregon head coach. And again, it's just another college coach that has been in this for a while, that is from maybe kind of the older guard, and is complaining, talking about all the things that are wrong in college athletics right now. So I say all that to say, could you imagine Fran Brown complaining about anything right now? And I think that is the single best trait of Fran Brown. The best thing for Fran Brown right now is he is so willing to embrace this new era of college athletics. And he's so willing to just say, we're going to do whatever we take to win here at Syracuse. If you think about it, Fran Brown is in a tough job at Syracuse. And previous coaches at Syracuse have complained about the situation. It's hard not to complain, especially nowadays with the NIL. Remember Dino Babers in his final year at Syracuse. Remember being at the press conference where he made a comment about how we don't have much depth in this program right now because it all got bought away in the transfer portal. And it did feel like Dino and other coaches got to a point where they just sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, this is a really hard place to win. And I'm not really knocking Dino Babers or all these other coaches that are complaining. There's a lot of things to complain about in college athletics right now. But I think that's the best thing about Fran Brown is he came in, he took the job at Syracuse, and he has just talked so much about how honored he is to represent the program. And he's not complained one bit about the state of college athletics. And if you think about it, he lives that Dart mindset. He lives that R in Dart, which is relentless. The guy is an incredible worker. And while, yes, there is so much that goes into being a college coach nowadays. And when I'm around coaches, I can level with how Dan Hurley is thinking, I've been sick to my stomach for 9 months, and I'm tired of feeling this way, and I don't get breaks, and all I do is recruit, and if I'm not recruiting, I'm coaching, and it's just like a never-ending cycle, and you're working around the clock. I mean, it is a really, really tough job. Now, you make millions of dollars, so that's great, and I understand all that, but it is a really tough job, and it's incredibly time-consuming. And Fran Brown has never once complained about that. He's the perfect coach for this era because he talks about, I wake up, I hardly get any sleep. All I need is 5 hours. I wake up, I try and dominate the snooze button. I get after it. I don't care who we're playing. I'm just trying to win Monday. And I know these are all things that you latch onto when your coach is successful. And then once it goes the other way, like we all bought into Dino's phrases early on. And then once the team started losing, all those phrases became a little tiring. But I will say the thing about Fran Brown is he has not complained at all about anything since he has stepped on campus. And it's a tough job at Syracuse. And it kind of goes back to something I remember Steve said on Orange Nation last week. The idea that if Fran Brown can't solve Syracuse football, I'm not really sure which head coach can. But that really crystallized for me this morning when I was reading that article about Dan Hurley. And it just makes you think so many coaches around college football, around college basketball right now are dropping off. They're losing interest. They're trying to go to the NFL. They're trying to go up to the professional ranks. They're just not cut out for it, or it's weighing on them. And I truly believe that Fran is never going to get to that point. You talk to the players, he's always going 100%. And he's just done everything that he said he would. He's been involved in the community. When you're at the coaches show, which is Thursday night out at Myers Creek now in the Inner Harbor, There was a good crowd there for the first show, and as soon as the show ends, what does Fran do? He walks up to pretty much everyone who was at the show. I think literally every person that hung around after the show. He shakes their hand. He thanks them for coming. It's kind of like he's even better than you think he would be in person, or once you get to know him, you're worried that maybe he's not quite as good as the press conference clips and everything like that. But the more you know Fran Brown, the more he really is living that Dart mindset. And he's just never complaining about anything. And his goals are win a national championship. His standard is so high. And yes, other coaches have come to Syracuse and they've talked about that high standard. But I think the difference is I really don't see a world where the standard is lowered under Fran Brown. I think the standard's only going to continue to rise because in his mind, they're building a program and the standard keeps going up and up and up. And you talk to the players and they feel like, yes, even though they lost a lot from last year, year two, the standard should continue to rise. So I think that is the single best trait about Fran Brown right now. His willingness to do whatever it takes to get to the top. His willingness to embrace this era of college athletics and all that's going on and just put his head down and say, I came from Camden, I made it to here, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get Syracuse to the top. He's not the type of coach that once you lose at a big-time school, he's looking around and thinking, wow, look at all the resources they have, or wow, look at the budget that they had compared to us. He's never really going to be that guy. His mindset is, yeah, we're going to get our NIL up there. We got to work on it, but we're going to do it. And that's the most impressive thing about really any person. But when you're talking a college football coach in this day and age, it's just great that Syracuse has that guy right now, a young guy in his first job that is willing to just work and work and work. Because there are a lot of coaches that are really good football minds. They can scheme it up, but they're pretty sick of the current state of college athletics. And again, I don't really blame those coaches. It's just nice that Syracuse has a guy that's so crazy that he's never going to complain about anything that's going on. And he's just going to wake up and dominate that snooze button and get after it. So, I don't know. That just made me think of Fran Brown earlier today. Just seeing more coaches complain out there and thinking, could you actually imagine Fran ever really complaining about anything? And that's how I feel right now, and I don't think the standard is going to change as long as he is the head coach. So when you're talking about when to extend Fran and what are the benchmarks and what are the things you want to see, I think that's the biggest selling point Fran Brown has right now for an extension. I am the perfect coach for this era of college football. I don't care what happens around me. I'm just going to keep working, and we're going to get to the top. That's his mindset. 315-437-7644 is the phone number to call. That's 4ESPN44. We'll hit our first time out here on Drive Time with Tim Leonard. When we come back, stock up, stock down on ACC football in week one. You're listening to Drive Time on ESPN Radio, QSportsTalk.com.
The deals and great selection at Pawn Pro.
Hey, Brian, what are you doing?
Why are you asking?
I got to figure out the board. Volley. And I'll get to the chat. How we doing, T-Tex? We'll put one there, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I believe it, Jen, the Dan Hurley comments, but that's pretty weak to... I mean, I guess it's not, like, awful. It's just, to me, like, you just... Oh, poor you. You didn't win the national championship this year. Nice, Satchel Sack. There we go. Where were we playing? That means you're better than the average golfer. Think about all the people in the world that play golf, and they say the average golfer can't break 100. Yeah, I feel like more people are getting into it since COVID. It is I am jealous of the people that are just starting golf because that's when you actually make progress and you get better each and every round. Okay, cool. Thanks, man. Because relish that time period where you go and every day you get better. If that is happening right now, once it ends, you're like, God, I hate this sport. Why am I still? Well, I thought it would be, now I'm going to break 90, now I'm going to break 80, but everyone hits a plateau naturally, like any other sport. Yeah, I bet. My brother has 3 kids, and his golf game has gone downhill, which is good for me because now I feel like I can beat him more. But he did beat me last time, even though he has 3 kids, so. I didn't know that, Dom, but you should bring that up to Steve. I guess that's more kind of the Duke mindset, right? That's why we dislike the Duke point guards. I don't know if you were listening earlier. Who's the second call? Oh. Tim. Okay. You know what he wants to talk about? Or? Okay, yeah.
Same stuff.
Tim and Eastwood, cool. Yeah, it's all right. A fellow Tim. I can remember that.
Syracuse sports talk shows on CuseSportsTalk.com.
Riding into our second segment of Drive Time. First week of the new show, Drive Time with Tim Leonard. Phone lines open, talking SU football, talking Fran Brown, of course. 315-437-7644 is the phone number to call for ESPN 44. All our shows will be archived immediately, CuseSportsTalk.com, Cuse Sports Talk on the YouTube page, and you can find the podcast version of every show. Every single word I say on this show will be on our podcast version, and a 1-hour podcast for you without breaks on ESPN Syracuse /Utica Rome, wherever you get your podcast. Let's go to the phone lines, and we got Jim in Pennsylvania kicking us off today. What's up, Jim?
Hey, Tim, congrats on your new show.
Thank you. Appreciate you listening and calling in.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I got a big kick out of the comparison when you started out mentioning the Danny Hurley and then comparing him to Coach Fran. There couldn't be any two more opposites.
Right.
I'm not saying this because I'm a Syracuse homer, but literally, I said this last year during the season, if you can find a less likable human being, and I do think the guy does, and I think he's been public about it, has mental health issues, but when Danny Hurley's threatening to beat up Skyler, the 19-year-old, philosophy major, who's 10 rows up in the stand yelling stuff, but when Patino's boy, who was the big booster, was sitting next to him at the Garden and harassed him, he called for security to come over and deal with the guy because, he was such a big, tough guy. So that part I bet got left out of the book. But anyway, just couldn't be a less likable person. Whereas Coach Fran, from the first time I met him, I was with athletic development staff for basketball at a game in December of what would that have been, 23, when he was introduced.
Yeah.
And And he introduced himself to me, and before the night was over, came back and shook my hand and said it was nice meeting you, and he could have just gone out the door at the end of the night after the Cornell game. And then later I came to the thing at the Wildcat, I guess whenever that was too, back in the summer last year. And, he wound up, I brought a gift, and he called me on my cell phone to thank me. And anyway, just couldn't be a nicer human being, and I get it. It's all about, people want wins and want things to happen. But, I think balance this year with what he did last year and getting to next season and see where he goes, I think people just really need to be behind him and let him, make things happen. Because, again, it's a world where he could be gone next year if things get better, but if we want to keep him, we also need to show that we're behind him. So I wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, that's well said, Jim. I'm glad you have a personal anecdote about it, because I have not met anyone who has gotten the chance to meet him that has not basically said the same thing, which is he knew my name, he remembered it. It's all the things that you teach people growing up to do, but he lives by all of that stuff. And I brought up the coaches show, but I just feel like that's an example too. He walks into the coaches show, he says hi to everyone, the coaches show ends, he thanks everyone for coming. Again, this is a time-consuming job, but he's taking time out of his day to kind of do the little things to make sure that he is doing the right things for the community and make sure that everyone remembers him in a positive light. And it's one thing to be a good football coach. It's a whole nother thing to kind of have that mindset. And then I think that's what makes him such a good recruiter is he lives by Dart. And then the players, I talked to Devin Grant before the first game, and he was like, it sounds like a cliche, but I'm literally living by Dart. Like, there's times when I'm doing my homework and I'm like on my phone for a second. Oh, shoot, I'm not being relentless. I'm not telling a friend to put his phone down and do his homework. I'm not being accountable. So it does sound like a cliche a little bit, but it's real life. And the more you know the guy, the more that you see that he lives that way.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And especially in this day and age where the money has taken everything. When the man sits up there and says to people, do you see the money this man gave me? Referring to just, again, what would be the bottom of the barrel by standards of college coaches today in the big time, right, power programs. And was thankful for it and acknowledging that publicly. And people like Kalen DeBoer, they're talking about firing him. He has a $70 million buyout, to leave Alabama. Like, come on, man. Like, at least there's still people out there that have some perspective, and the world needs more perspective for sure and on all fronts. Yeah.
All right. I appreciate you checking in, Jim. Great call there from Jim in Pennsylvania. And, on Dan Hurley, he is right. And it's just, he's a very unlikable guy. The one thing I will say is you think back on the glory days of kind of like college basketball, and what college basketball is known for is having colorful coaches, and Jim Boeheim was one of them for so many years, and that's what made the Big East such a great conference back in the day. I do feel like we're lacking personalities in college basketball because all these coaches are complaining about NIL and complaining about the state of things, and they've left. And you think about all the legendary coaches the game has lost in the last 5 years. So at least Dan Hurley is kind of like a brand name at this point. He's just a brand name for all the wrong reasons, it seems like. Yes, he's a tremendous coach. He's on the short list of best coaches in the sport, and they've won 2 national titles in the last 3 years. So you can't knock him too much. It's just funny to me that the way he is always in the limelight and always in the tabloids or the headlines for kind of just his attitude and some of the stuff that he does. So it's just also funny that Syracuse is playing UConn this week. Maybe we've got some UConn football fans listening, and they're going to be furious that I'm going out of my way when it's not even basketball season to attack Dan Hurley. Let's keep the phone calls coming here. Let's check in with Tim, who is in Eastwood. Tim, what's on your mind?
Hey, congratulations on the new show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The difference between Dan Hurley and those great coaches of the past, the colorful Big East coaches, was that those coaches weren't threatening spectators, okay, and whining about security, like you said, or like the last caller just said, whining about people sitting near them in the stands and everything. He's a big tough guy when he has to be, but when somebody stands up to him, he backs down. I find it like you brought up before about what Mike Gundy said.
Yeah.
I find that absolutely hilarious, being that he has built his program at the back of the support of the Oklahoma State program is because of the billionaire T. Boone Pickens, okay? And now here he is complaining about another program who might be spending more than him, but you know what? Too bad. His coaching record is all because of the support and the financial support and the facilities and all that brought on by billionaire T. Boone Pickens. So I just find that absolutely hilarious that he has the gall to say that to Dan Lanning. It's comical what these coaches going back and forth on this issue.
And look, I think it is a little bit of an issue that so much of how good football teams are now is just how many millionaires you have that can donate to your program. And T. Boone Pickens passed away in 2019, so that's why Oklahoma State probably feels like they don't have the support that they did. And now we're into the NIL era, and we're into rev share, where it's become maybe even more important. I mean, we always knew the players were getting paid. Now it's more of a thing. So I hear you. I think it's just sort of weird to say it publicly. Obviously, you can be thinking it, and I'm sure even the Syracuse basketball coaching staff last year was thinking, man, we need more money. But it's also, that's kind of on you. Like Fran is saying, all right, like our NIL's not good when I got here, but we're going to make it good. I'm going to do the right things. And that goes back to kind of his attitude with everything. He wants to make sure he remembers all the donors' names and does everything right so that they do generate more money. And look, it's partially because they won 10 games, but it seems like football has generated more NIL because he's got the right philosophy on how to grow that.
Yeah, he's actively involved in it. Very active in it. He's at all the golf tournaments. He's at all the fundraisers. He's definitely got the right attitude. And you're not going to see him, cry about, we're the little sisters of the poor. He's the one that laughed at, Trevor Pena wanting $2 million a year. He said, okay, go elsewhere. And, one thing I was worried about was losing Trevor Pena, but I think Jonte Cook has filled in more than nicely so far.
Yeah.
How did not to get off topic? How did Pena do in this opener with Penn State?
I didn't even look at that. I know they didn't really play anyone that good. I'll pull that up as we're talking.
Nevada.
Yeah. I mean, their schedule, their first 4 games, I think they really play no one. We're not really going to know too much. He had 7 catches, 74 yards. So, a solid game in the first game. They really don't have much at wide receiver, so he might put up some good numbers.
Right.
But I'm glad you brought that up, Tim. I think Jonte Cook's a better football player than Trevor Pena, and that's not just sour grapes or me kind of just saying that because of how it went down. I just think he's more talented, and honestly, I think Trevor Pena, there's talk of him last year, like, is he an NFL talent? I think he's a really good college kind of slot receiver. I'm not sure that he's an NFL talent, though. I think he really benefited from the system last year, and I think Jonte Cook's more talented.
Yeah. Potentially. We're just hoping because he's had injury issues.
Yeah.
So let's have him stay healthy and stay out of trouble.
Right.
That's another thing with him.
Yeah, for sure. All right, good phone call from Tim in Eastwood. Phone lines remain open throughout the show until 6 p.m. as we are on now drive time 5 to 6 p.m. every weeknight. 315-437-7644. If you have thoughts on Fran Brown, if you have thoughts on UConn coming up inside the Dome Saturday, if you have any thoughts on football whatsoever, or if you just want to talk other sports, we're welcome to take your phone calls here, 315-437-7644. Interested to see Pena did have a solid first game, and Jonte Cook, at the end there, Tim brought up injuries. He did say during the media player availability last night, I saw some of the reports that he is probably fine for the game, it seems like, against UConn, and is encouraged by, how he's rehabbing. And it seemed like his body just kind of tightened up on him a little bit in the fourth quarter. So it's something to kind of monitor how he starts, but I feel like he will be healthy come Saturday, and he is the most talented player on the team. I've said that throughout the preseason. I still believe that based on how he played. And Tim is right. They just got to make sure that he is mature off the field and he's doing all the right things. But that's another reason why Fran Brown is a great coach for this era, because he's not scared to take a guy like Jonte Cook, bring him under his wing, and he's been honest about, we just had to really structure everything out for him. We talked to his dad, and now that he's got a structured schedule, he is in a much better spot in terms of how he is approaching football and his off-the-field classroom activities, everything like that. So all reports have been great about Jonte Cook. I think he's still in for a breakout year, and Tim's right. You just got to hope that he stays healthy. But I said it once they acquired Jonte Cook. I think he really is a better football player, or at least a more talented football player than Trevor Pena. Trevor Pena had a terrific year last year, and I'm not trying to knock him, but he really didn't do a ton in the years before that. And I think Jeff Nixon has such a good offensive system. I think Kyle McCord was such a good quarterback that a lot of wide receivers would have thrived last year. And it's going to be tougher maybe for a wide receiver to thrive this year, knowing that it isn't Kyle McCord. But I think we're all fairly confident in Steve Angeli, and that'll be interesting to monitor as we go forward. We'll hit a timeout, 315-437-7644. If you'd like to call in, this is Drive Time on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
Always a thrill when the home team takes the field.
Yeah, you got to make us a part of your routine again, guys. Yeah, I mean, Pena's a really good player. Like I said, I don't want to knock him. I just don't know if I also don't think he was asking for $2 million. I think that kind of got like misconstrued based on kind of how Fran. I mean, he made those comments on Orange Nation and they blew up. But regardless, he was asking for more money because Penn State had a hole at wide receiver and they've got money and they offered it to him. And I think Fran probably looked at it and was like, he's not worth that. Like, we've got a lot of good wide receivers. If there's one position that we can probably fill, and we've got a great offensive coordinator and all that stuff. Yeah, Mike Gundy did another promo this week, Tronic, where he was like, I'm 58 now and I'm still a man. Or I think it was for some sponsor or something like that. I didn't watch it. I just saw a tweet about it. Yeah, he did say that. Like, you're not worth more than my coaches. I mean, I'm sure they gave him good money. Yeah, I'm trying not to overhype Jonte Cook, but I don't know. He's really talented. If he can keep it in line off the field, he's one of the more talented guys they've had in a while. And you hope that, I mean, I think you hope this with everyone. Like, you just don't want him to leave after 1 year. You hope that this isn't like Jonte Cook breakout year. All right, now he's going to go get more money somewhere else. But I'm sure they'll do everything they can. Really, that's big with Steve Angeli and Ricky Collins, too. Like, just thinking around college football this week, I mean, I watched all the quarterbacks that did well in week one. A lot of them were in their second year, and it's become exceedingly rare to have a quarterback that is in the same system for the second year. And just talking to Angeli last night, we did some interviews for the radio broadcast on Learfields and taped him last night, and he's like, it's a big playbook. Like, you know, there's a lot of plays, which is, I think everyone loves the Jeff Nixon playbook, but it takes time to learn that playbook. So if you think about, okay, if he comes back for a second year, I sleep quite a bit, Kev. I mean, 7.5 hours, 8 hours. I really prioritize sleep. So, yeah, and I'm young. I go to sleep at I'm not like Fran Brown. I don't drink coffee, so I need my 7.5 hours. I go to sleep at probably midnight, depending on if there's something on, like a game. stay up for that or whatever, and then wake up at like 8. Because if you think about it, I do have a lot on my plate, but most of the work I can kind of like I try to get some work done at night when I get back. You're always kind of thinking about stuff for the shows, but you can get up and like I don't get into the office usually until like 10:30 or 11. And I usually wake up and do some other things beforehand or book guests or send out some emails and whatnot, but sleep is not a huge problem for me. I go down early and usually I'm tired and get a full like 7.5 hours. Yeah, it was a pretty physical game DB-wise on both sides, I felt like. Actually watching a lot of the college games this week, there's been some physical kind of hand checking from the DBs. Luke Carney, he seems like a good guy. I don't really know him, but, I've only heard good things. Yeah, Supercat, that's the Fran Brown schedule right there. Welcome back into Drive Time. New 1-hour show every weeknight. ESPN Radio Syracuse, ESPN Radio Utica Rome. You can watch the show. Imagine that. A radio show you can watch. CuseSportsTalk.com. Cuse Sports Talk on the YouTube page as well. The chat is hopping today on a Wednesday. Get involved in the chat. We're also taking your phone calls as always. 315-437-7644 is the phone number to call. That is always the phone number to call if you have thoughts on Syracuse football, on anything going on in the sports world right now. We will take your phone calls throughout until we sign off today right around the top of the hour. Let's get into some thoughts on the college football world and specifically what happened in the ACC over the long weekend, the week 1 of college football. Stock up, stock down across the ACC. And keep in mind, when I say stock up and stock down, which one of these are Syracuse opponents on the daunting ACC schedule that they have this season. We begin with a stock up for Miami and Carson Beck. They're on the schedule. That's going to be a tough game, and I think it may be even tougher than we thought going into the season because Miami got that big win over Notre Dame, and Carson Beck looked like the Carson Beck of 2 years ago, not the Carson Beck of last year at Georgia. There was concerns on how healthy Carson Beck would be after he had the injury at the end of last year. Remember, he got hurt in the playoff game. I believe it was the playoff game. Maybe it was the SEC championship game. Either way, it was late in the season last year. Carson Beck went down, makes the transfer to Miami. They shell out all kinds of money. Followed the Cavender, one of the Cavender twins, who was his girlfriend at the time. I don't think that's still going on, but Carson Beck is still at Miami, and he's throwing the football really well. They protected him really well. It seemed like he had all day to throw. Really impressed by Miami and just how they matched up against Notre Dame in the trenches. That's a Notre Dame team that played for the national championship last year, and I thought Carson Beck looked really good. Now, he had an interception that turned into a touchdown because C.J. Daniels made what might be the catch of the year in college football when everything is all said and done. But after week one overreaction, this could be the year Miami makes it to their second ever ACC championship game. Kind of crazy that they've only been to one. Remember last year, the Orange knocked them out of the ACC championship game. Stock down, we got to start with the obvious one. Across the ACC, the biggest stock down is the UNC Tar Heels and Bill Belichick. That was a disaster on Monday night. And hand up, I thought UNC was going to be pretty good. I really was pretty optimistic that Belichick, at the very least, would improve their defense. if you think about it, Bill Belichick teams, they've declined since they lost Tom Brady. I know that, and it's such a fascinating thing now that Belichick's legacy might come down a little bit to how he does at college football with this whole new roster. I thought, for one, when they hired him, he would bring in better players, mostly because UNC was talking a big game about their NIL budget and how they're embracing football more, and they're trying to get ready for the Super League, and this is a different time across North Carolina athletics. Maybe they're not just a basketball school anymore. Turns out I think they're still a basketball school, even though they paid big money for their coach, and apparently they do have a lot of money invested in football in terms of NIL and things like that. I really just thought at least the defense would be good. I didn't know what we'd get offensively. I knew that they had a pretty inferior roster compared to just top teams in the ACC. And that's kind of Bill Belichick. I mean, it just feels like he's not going to try and get those big-name guys. He's just so cocky about his coaching that he's going to try and reel in the Holy Cross long snapper and turn him into the offensive guard or whatever the heck it is. I mean, their center was, I know it was the backup center, but those snaps were terrible. I know a couple of them were short. Even the ones that were right back to the quarterback, Gio Lopez, they were going a half second slower than a normal center snaps the football. So things like that was pretty appalling. The other thing, and I see some of our people commenting in the chat, they brought in 70 new players. Yes, it's a whole new roster for UNC, so maybe I should have never bought into them in the first place. I'm sure it'll get better. Charlotte this week is one of the worst teams in FBS. I'm sure that they will win that game. If they don't win that game, then holy cow, it is a complete disaster for UNC. But the other thing is just, it feels like UNC would be playing to the final whistle at least week one. I mean, it kind of felt like the players quit on them and quit on the coaching staff once it got to the second half. Stock up. Did you guys see the Cal quarterback? I'm going to try and pronounce his name. Hopefully it'll just become JKS is his nickname going forward. Jaron Kiawa Sagapotelli. That could be right. That could be wrong. Either way, he played Oregon State. Now, I want to say as a caveat before I just praise him, because he made every throw and he looked very, very good. It was kind of a surprise this guy won the job. He was at Oregon, committed, showed up to campus, flipped his commitment after being on campus. He's a true freshman, high-end 4-star recruit. Oregon wanted him, and he said, I'll go play for Cal and I'll be the starter. He won the job kind of surprisingly. He had a 95.5 passing grade, according to Pro Football Focus. 20 for 30, 235 yards, 3 touchdowns in his first game. The caveat is, I have never seen someone have more time to throw the football. Oregon State is not good, and there was no pass rush. Just watching back the condensed game, this Cal quarterback, JKS, had all day to throw, but he did look very good for a true freshman. Numbers we really haven't seen from a true freshman in a while. He's stock up. Stock down is Clemson's offense after week one. Cade Klubnik looks shaky. LSU has a really good defense, but once again, Clemson struggled to move the football against an SEC defense. They're really weak at the running back position. And their top wide receiver, Antonio Williams, went down with an injury in the first quarter, and it felt like they never really got into a groove offensively after that. Pretty disappointing from a Clemson perspective. Now, I think they'll still be a college football playoff team because their schedule lines up pretty well for them. And nowadays, with a 12-team playoff, you can schedule someone tough week one, you can lose that game out of conference, and you're still perfectly fine. So that's something to keep in mind when you're talking about, why did Syracuse schedule Tennessee in the opener? I know the ACC schedule is daunting this year, but you can schedule tough and lose games in a 12-team playoff era right now. Stock up to running quarterbacks of the ACC. Running quarterbacks just period across college football had a good week. Haynes King had a tremendous first game in the ACC's solid win over Colorado from Georgia Tech. King became just the second FBS player since 1995 to run for 140, pass for 140, and score 3 touchdowns in a season opener. Jalen Hurts, when he was at Oklahoma in 2019, is the other. He had a $156 on the ground, scored the game-winning 45-yard rushing TD. Georgia Tech is going to be a tough game on the road. And another hand up from me, I did not think Tommy Castellanos was the answer. I thought it was going to be like DJU at Florida State. It could just be a week one overreaction, but he didn't even have to throw the football, and Alabama looked really bad in the trenches against Florida State. It was a complete reversal of how we felt about Florida State in week one from last year to this year. And Castellanos, who was talking a lot of crap about Alabama and Nick Saban, he backed it up. So I'll give it to him. He was 9 for 14, 152 yards in the air. So didn't really throw it much, but 16 carries, 78 rushing yards. Dual threat quarterbacks are all over the place in college football right now. And he was only sacked once by Alabama. They might have something, actually, Florida State. I'm not going to overreact too much because I feel like there's always one or two games that look really silly in week 5 or 6 when you look back on the week 1 results. But they really thoroughly dominated Alabama. Nothing was fluky about the way they won that game. We'll hit our final timeout here on Drive Time. Still time to work in a phone call if you call right now at 315-437-7644. We're back after this to wrap things up on Drive Time here on ESPN Radio, QSportsTalk.com.
Always a thrill when the home team.
Yeah, Randy Moss and the girlfriend. That was cinema the first drive. Yeah, I will say San Diego Cuse. I don't know if people are talking about him out that way, but it's still weird for me to do ACC stock up, stock down, and talk about a Cal quarterback. Especially when we're not playing him. It's kind of like, oh, that's cool that he's good, but what does it mean for Syracuse, really? But I did have to shout him out. Yeah, Belichick was very isolated on the sideline. It was weird. Appreciate you, Super Cap. We all still love Brian here, and he had a great show as well. So nice of you to say that, though. Yeah, I don't know. Jordan might not be racing to get to their week 3 game against Richmond. That might not have as much hype as game 1. But yeah, there was chatter at, what was it, 2019, I think, when they played UNC and Brady came and people were saying Weitzman was bringing Jordan. Oh, Sean Lewis, that's right. How about Jason Beck in week 1? You guys see that? Utah had a huge win. I mean, UCLA with Nico looked rough. I think Tennessee may have upgraded at quarterback based on how week 1 went. I'm also not totally sold on Aguilar being incredible, but I think he's in a good system there. Utah did look really good, though. Beck is Syracuse has had some good coordinators in recent years. I think Jeff Nixon is one of the best in the country right now. I think Beck is a really smart offensive mind. And then Tony White, of course. I mean, he improved the defense when they didn't have much here, talent-wise. I'm leaving out a couple others, I'm sure. Yeah, Kev, I'm not bullish on your Cowboys. Who knows? Maybe they'll surprise some people. Yeah, we'd rather see Jordan Capozzi sitting courtside than MJ, though. Yeah, that was disappointing. It's easier said than done. I think Aguilar's pretty good at just getting the ball out, but they needed to pressure him because all the stats on him were when he does get pressured, he turns it over and he becomes a gunslinger and makes bad decisions, and he just never really was flustered. Yeah, I would say T-Takes, that's also what a lot of ACC teams would have looked like maybe against Tennessee's O-line and D-line. And honestly, the O-line, I mean, they moved the ball running it. I don't know. There is something to be said for Syracuse has not been very good at getting pressure on the quarterback in this era so far. Yeah, I mean, they controlled the line. Don't get me wrong. I'm not too worried because it's Tennessee, and they probably would have controlled the line with a lot of teams. I didn't have them running the ball as effectively as they did against that good of a defense. I mean, I said it, I think, Monday. Tennessee held the opponents under 20 points in every game but 3 last year. Final segment today of Drive Time with Tim Leonard. Thanks to everyone who's called in, everyone in the chat. First week of the new show. Excited to get this thing going. We'll be previewing the UConn matchup a little bit more tomorrow. Going to chat with Bob Joyce, who covers UConn football very closely. He'll be inside the dome working the game for the UConn radio team. We'll get a full scouting report tomorrow on the Huskies. We're going to start a new segment, Scouting Report Thursday. If you're into getting the details on the other team, keep in mind Thursdays is when I plan to do my homework and give you guys all the stats you need to know and just make you smarter about the other team. Give a full deep dive scouting report tomorrow. We'll, of course, make our predictions for the game on Friday, 5 to 6 every weeknight going forward. You can find us here for Drive Time. Can always watch back the shows, QSportsTalk.com and Q Sports Talk YouTube page as well. Before we get out of here today, let's finish with just a little bit of a tease of kind of what I'm thinking will be some of the big keys for this UConn game on Saturday.
I'm trying to say goodbye and end this.
All right, get out.
Don't keep talking.
Run to your fridge.
You're standing there.
I'm leaving.
Pick up the phone and dial in.
Okay, I'm gonna leave.
I'm waiting.
We're not playing last word.
This is the last call.
Last call here on the program tonight, 315-437-7644. If you want to get in the final word, you can call right now for ESPN 44 if you have thoughts on this UConn-Syracuse game. The biggest thing that I am interested in, and it's not a shocker really, is how the run defense looks. And what I have been able to glean so far from UConn is they return quite a bit on offense. And it was a pretty productive offense. Now, UConn last year didn't play much. Remember, they got completely shellacked by Maryland on the road week 1. After that, they played 3 ACC schools, and they played them pretty well. Actually, they played 4 ACC schools if you count the bowl game. They played Wake Forest, lost by 3. They played Duke on the road. They lost that game by 5. They played Syracuse, of course, and that was a pretty close game. Maybe not as close as the score indicated, but still, UConn hung around against a Syracuse team that was 10.5-point favorites going into the game last year. The Orange did not cover. The spread is now down to 6.5, no matter where you look right now, it seems like. I was just checking ESPN Bet. Of course, a lot of us cannot bet on that in New York, but 6.5 is the line right now. It opened in the neighborhood of 9.5, 8.5, depending on where you look. So there's been some UConn love. We had Bill Conley on the Orange Nation show earlier today, and he's a guy that breaks down the analytics and has his SP Plus rankings, which actually favor UConn right now. Now, I'm not really buying into that too much because he's got 1 week of sample size, and he even admitted that you have to base those rankings off of a lot of just off-season predictions and how much you return, which brings me back to the point that it seems like Syracuse is going to be able to move the ball, though, because UConn does not return a ton on defense. So the big concern really is how does the run defense look against a UConn team that moved the ball pretty well on the ground against Duke last year on the road. They ran for about $180 as a team. They returned one of their star running backs from last year. It was kind of running back by committee last season for the Huskies, and Cam Edwards is back. He's probably going to try and rush in the neighborhood of 80, 90 yards. That's kind of what he's done against power conference or ACC teams. So they've been pretty consistently good at moving the ball on offense. I'm kind of leaning towards the over in this game right now, but I do think Syracuse should have a much better performance through the air, and I think they'll be able to move the ball on the ground for sure. Wes Ho, the Syracuse transfer, is their only returning starter on the O-line. They did add some nice transfers, but I think they will match up, of course, very well in the trenches against UConn. So we will leave you with that as our last call for today. Thanks so much to everyone who was listening and watching us on QSportsTalk.com and on the YouTube page. Thanks to Giovanni Heater, David, and Jordan for producing behind the scenes. And we will talk to you tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another edition of Drive Time.
This is Orange